Okay, everybody. We are going to open the floor for questions. So did anyone have any thoughts, any things that came up in their group that they'd like to chat about? Don't make me flick the lights. Did they? Supervisor. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask? Come on.
Do I have to?
You can try to protect if you can't hear it.
Okay. Sometimes I have a loud voice. I can stand up. My question is, at the beginning you were talking about place. Yeah. I'm right here, so it's pretty easy. At the beginning you were talking about place and this reconceptualization of place and a critical place inquiry, which is really exciting for me because I'm doing that but drawing on sort of feminist geographer Doreen Massey. But I was wondering if you could bring that in. Later you switched a little bit to talking about land, and I followed you through, but I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about this critical place conceptualization as it relates to the questions you were asking, and sort of this understanding of land and this critical place inquiry a little more.
Thank you for that question, because I definitely didn't narrate it, so I can see how it's useful to hear more on this. So critical place inquiry is a framework that I developed with a white settler scholar named Marcia McKenzie. And her work is in environmental, like eco-justice and education, and my work is in Indigenous studies and education. And we were trying to develop critical place inquiry as something that had a lot of mutual stakes and mutual desires for what we'd like to see happen in the field. We wanted to have something to share with our students as being like, this is the way we'd really like for you to be taking up questions of place, especially in studies that are not concerned with place. So there's been, and so our reading and our framing out of critical place inquiry comes out of a kind of reading of the spatial turn, a reading of the new materialist turn, but also requiring for the people who are getting excited and really taking up those turns to carry out their work in ways that are responsible to Indigenous people and responsible to Indigenous land. So critical place inquiry was a framework that we've developed together that I think is informed by Indigenous conceptualizations of land, but is a way of broadening out so that the material that you're engaging with is not all necessarily Indigenous material, but it still doesn't allow you to sidestep or overlook or wiggle out the hard questions that Indigenous conceptualizations of land require for settlers to take up. So it's meant to be, it has a broader citational practice than just from Indigenous social thought, but it is responsible to Indigenous sovereignty. So it's an attempt to say, this is how we read promiscuously, but also maintain attention to Indigenous sovereignty. I care much more about Indigenous sovereignty, so it's easy for me to dip into that part of critical place inquiry. And that's really the entirety of the book that we wrote together, Place and Research, is where we're laying all of that out. Thank you for that question.
Anyone else? Are you okay coming up here to? Okay, I'll reiterate if they can't hear.
Could you elaborate on the notion of haunting as a theory of change? You talked about haunting in a settler society in a way that would cause small acts of resistance, and how that haunting is associated with that place. Maybe I'm not sure, but could you elaborate a little bit? Sure. Thank you.
So for anyone who didn't hear that, the question was asking about haunting in relation to place, and how haunting can be used as an act of resistance or in the thinking.
I should know better than just to do like a little passing thing on haunting, because everybody always wants to know about the haunting. The haunting stuff comes out of work that I've been doing with a visual artist named C. Ree, and she and I wrote a paper called The Glossary of Haunting, where we started to think out loud about how stories of haunting and scary stories in settler societies really a part of what's so scary about scary stories in North America is this presumed innocence of the person who's getting haunted. Like, the good guy is getting haunted, or the sweet girl is getting haunted, and that's part of what's so scary. And so we started thinking together about stories of hauntings and monsters that come out of Japan and come out of other places that don't presume innocence but actually accept harm done by prior generations as a perfectly reasonable reason for a ghost to be haunting a person, and not to presume innocence and not to be shocked. So this sort of silly idea turned into a longer project where we started thinking about ideas of social justice that are taken off the table, including haunting. So how do we get justice when our avenues are so locked down, are so overdetermined, are so Trumpified? We were writing from the States, but in the United States that allowed for Trump to be elected. So this was a long time coming. So we write about revenge. Like, why can't we be talking about revenge? Like, revenge might do it. Like, revenge might get us what we need, or hunting might get us what we need. So this is work that we have crafted out of a fictionalized composite narrator, and I then made a second installation of the glossary with an artist collective called the Super Futures Haunt Collective, and now have written a third installation of the glossary that will be coming out with Karen Recollet, who's a Cree scholar at U of T, and that one is on visitations. So it's a part of this sort of longer work that is taking up the narrator of the future ghost, and the idea that the need for justice is going to outlast my life. And I don't want to haunt you, but I will, if that's the only way that I can get justice. It's very conceptual work. I don't plan on actually haunting you, Caroline. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Claire, and I just want to follow up on that idea of like haunting and revenge, and think about decolonization from like a transnational perspective. So when you talk about revenge, I started to kind of think about the Haitian Revolution and that period of decolonization, and the idea of couper brûler caille, which is cut off their heads, burn their houses to the ground, and that's what it took for Haitian independence to occur, and that sense of sovereignty. And so how do you understand Indigenous decolonization with other struggles of decolonization around the world?
So the question was drawing on the Haitian Revolution specifically, and how do you understand decolonization in regards to other decolonization initiatives around the world? Yeah, thank
Thank you for that question. I didn't spend much time on this idea, but one of the ideas that I've really learned from reading Frantz Fanon is the idea that colonization is specific in terms of its time and place. And so even though we might have broad theories of colonization, how it happens in each given place is really particular. And to me, it means the corollary, that decolonization in each place is particular. And so while I write about decolonization, I feel like I'm really careful to try to talk to what decolonization will mean in settler societies in North America. So I read a great deal and particularly the Haitian Revolution. I'm very compelled by the idea of people defending their homelands and the kind of theories and the kinds of framings that come out of defending your own homeland. But I think that it's important to consider the conditions of settler colonialism. And so in the United States and in Canada, the conditions of settler colonialism have not just been the dispossession of Indigenous people from homelands and the erasure and genocide of Indigenous people from land, but has also involved the stealing and the theft of African people from their homeland, and has involved the making of humans, of African humans, into enslaved people. And so for me, when I think about what decolonization will have to mean on Turtle Island, it has to mean the rematriation of Indigenous land and life, and it has to mean the abolition of slavery in all of its forms. So this is a part of what is at work in all of my teaching and in all of my writing. It's more than I can do in a particular talk, but for me, the projects of settler colonialism and anti-Blackness are tandem projects, and we need to be working to dismantle both of them at the same time in order to call any of this decolonization.
We have time for maybe one more question. Yep.
How do you, in practical terms, has there been work done outlining how you see rematriation of land taking place in Canada? Is it like
Did I hear you correctly when you're asking about the practical aspects of rematriation?
I think that there are numerous collectives that are rematriating their own homeland, and that each of those activities are happening in ways that are specific to their own teachings and specific to their own immediate conditions. We don't know each other well enough for me to blow up their spot and let you know what they're doing. I don't know if I can trust you, so I'm not gonna share names of those groups, but the kind of rematriation that I'm talking about is already underway, and is underway because people don't have water to drink in their homelands and don't have, it is absolutely necessary that people are engaging in these kinds of practices in order to survive and in order to to bring their children up. So I don't think that I am talking about something that will be sanctioned by the nation state. The nation state makes these practices unsafe and makes these communities vulnerable.
Well, I'm amazed that we're on time. So, if anybody, unless anybody has anything burning to ask, we're going to close up. Perfect. Please give me another round of applause for Ruth and Eve. Thank you cards as well. But also a huge round of applause for Zilia, who's been filming. This will be online and freely available probably, I think, on the ACME YouTube site when Zilia gets to it, so thank you. And again to Black Creek Community Farms for providing just wonderful food and being rock stars in terms of farming. And of course to everybody for venturing off campus, which evidently can be a scary thing sometimes in the conference world. So I appreciate your patience and for coming out and sharing your thoughts. So, thank you.